The Blair Witch Project, which set the very tone for American found footage horror, was the brainchild of Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. Released in 1999, the movie left no stone unturned to give the audience an immersive viewing experience, convincing them that it is beyond fiction, a documentary about real people and their experiences. The story follows three filmmaker students, Joshua, Michael, and Heather, who set out on a mission to uncover the legend of the Blair Witch. While interviewing the locals of Burkittsville, Maryland, the trio discovers some eerie artifacts and realize that they are being haunted by something evil. The movie became a fan favorite in no time, with Heather's sobbing face still giving nightmares. So, how did the Blair Witch Project manage to change the fate of American horror completely? Let's do some digging. One fine day, an idea dawned upon two film students from the University of Central Florida to invent a myth that would be strong enough to blur the line between reality and fiction. And that is how the urban legend of Blair Witch was born from the minds of Sanchez and Myrick in 1991. Fun fact, Sanchez got the name for this local folklore from his sister's school, Blair High School, which somehow just clicked. The legend follows the ghost of a fictional person, Ellie Kedward, who was a resident of Blair, the fictitious former name for Burkittsville. Upon exposure to witchcraft, she was executed in 1785. Ever since, the disappearance and murder of various Burkittsville locals has been connected to her angry spirit. Young and ambitious, the duo barely had any funds, a proper screenplay, or star actors to shoot the film. All they had was hope and a 35-page story outline, which, albeit, was detailed, but dialogue? Well, they were to be improvised. After 5 years of contemplation and preparation, Myrick and Sanchez finally got to work in 1996 and began choosing actors a year later with a tight budget of only $60,000. Casting, a decision that sealed the fate of Blair Witch Project as a bona fide blockbuster, became a story in itself. Myrick and Sanchez advertised a casting call in the Backstage magazine to be held in New York for an improvisational feature film titled The Black Hill Project. The flyer came with every possible disclaimer about outdoor shooting conditions, physically challenging roles, and uncomfortable situations. However, it caught the eye of a sunny New Paltz theater major who had no prior professional experience and was stunned by the idea of improvising a film. It was none other than Michael Williams. The directors had one question set for all the actors. You've just served 10 years of a 25-year prison sentence. Tell us why you should be due for parole. Michael immediately did an impersonation of Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption and was onboarded for the job. In the same casting session, Heather Donahue's answer to the question was that she would not be let out on parole. This shook the makers, and they knew Heather was special. Joshua Leonard, on the other hand, who was a freelance videographer and photographer, learned about the Blair Witch Project from a friend. Broke and in need of a job, he went to the audition, probably to the first casting call, and was elected on the spot. He was then asked to wait till the makers had enough money to start filming. These three unknown actors were to become the heart of the film, but to the makers, they were just kids. No money for special effects, 3 unprofessional actors, and an extremely detailed script of about 40 pages. That is how the Blair Witch Project went on the floors, or should I say, went into the woods. Using their own names to portray the characters, Michael, Heather, and Joshua were taught how to operate a 16mm camera and an 8mm recorder. They were asked to record everything they did on an 8-day shoot, and that is how we got the shaky, grainy filming which makes Blair Witch Project what it is today. The fact that there was no special effect in the film was a blessing in disguise. What the audience saw were authentic reactions of the actors who did not know what was awaiting them in the forest. Myrick and Sanchez used a unique filmmaking process to achieve the authentic found footage shots that scare us to date. The entire method was very carefully chalked out. Having a military background, producer Greg Hale introduced the makers to GPS technology. 2 devices were used, one for the crew and the other for the actors. Greg managed the GPS navigation, enabling the actors to move from one location to another without direct help. Moreover, he also tutored them to use the GPS tool and brushed them up with basic survival and safety tips. Sanchez and Myrick also reconned the woodlands weeks before shooting and spotted particular locations for camping and gag scenes. Every component in the film was strategically calculated for maximum psychological impact. The idea was to leave the actors as isolated as possible with minimum communication once they went into the woods and began camping. The crew only intervened when something went extremely off script or needed immediate attention. The production initially planned to follow the actors physically and supervise them, but it proved to be too tedious a process. This idea was then scrapped off and the makers relied on reviewing the footage collected. All the actors had pre-paced prompts and stage instructions that they had to follow and improvise. The actors had to undergo a grueling filming experience while camping in harsh cold conditions and had to rely on the GPS daily to discover reference points for supplies, food, and new batteries for cameras. At every waypoint station marked with specific numbers, the GPS would indicate how far the next exit point is, and the actors would use a compass to reach there for the next event. They often jokingly called this shooting a punk rock process. The makers even trained the actors in the basics of filmmaking and employed rudimentary equipment to shoot, like a high-8 camera, which pretty much does the work by itself once rolled, not requiring much technical know-how. Moreover, Michael was taught how to handle audio tools like wiring and recording with a DAT machine. However, things were a lot more difficult for the in-film videographer, Joshua Leonard. He had to operate a heavier CP16 camera without any experience. Though the director of photography, Neil Frederick, personally coached Joshua, he still messed up some measurements and focus points. These risks could have been a disaster for any other film, but for the Blair Witch Project, it enhanced the originality and amateurish aesthetics of the found footage narrative. Makers followed a survivalist approach, and the setup was so intense that the actors' food ration was cut down over the days, only enough to make them fatigued and irritable, to get their raw emotions on screen. The crew members even disturbed the actors' sleep by making scary noises at night and shaking their tents, a process that eventually escalated. In the beginning, the actors duly responded to the cues of a branch snapping or rocks falling and enacted their parts with dedication. However, with time, they grew weary of these noises and would wake each other up, dreading what they had to do next. This exhaustion, fear, and frustration was exactly what Myrick and Sanchez were going for. The rigorous training did not stop at technical preparations. The actors were taken to the location where the characters supposedly met, in Montgomery College, and traveled around Maryland to get into the essence of the story. In order to relate themselves to the 1994 era, the actors read several magazines of that time. Heather had an even more responsible task at hand. She had to be well-versed with the Blair Witch folktale because her character was designed to lead the story while the other two were intentionally kept in the dark. When the actors began interviewing the locals, they didn't even know that most of them were actors. They approached the residents and explained that they were a group of film students doing a documentary about the Blair Witch. However, the best interview came from an unknown person, not an actor. In Behind the Black Hill interview, a teacher, Susie Cooch, explained how she was moved by the efforts of 3 college students, and when Heather asked her about the Blair Witch, she made everything up to help them with the project. Even her 3-year-old daughter, Ingrid, added to the creepiness of the story. She started crying as soon as Susie began narrating the Blair Witch myth and tried covering her mother's mouth. As they say, the universe conspires in your favor. The makers allowed the story to take its own course, with the actors having no knowledge of future actions until it actually happened. For instance, when Heather was questioned by the other two, those questions were impromptu. There was nothing of that sort in the script. Interestingly, when the directors found Heather and Joshua to be continuously quarreling, they pulled Joshua out even though it was decided for Mike to disappear. Heather was the soul of the movie, and the directors did not want to mess with her contribution. Remember the iconic "I'm so scared" speech? It was all Heather. She improvised the entire thing, which went on to become the film's most famous moment. The film's ambiguous ending, which showed Mike and Heather going inside an abandoned house and getting attacked by an unknown force, was the most difficult part to film. A 19th century historic building, the Griggs House, was chosen for the climax, and Sanchez played pre-recorded screams of Joshua from a boombox. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, here's the catch. Sanchez waited for the actors to doze off before blasting the noise. Moreover, neither Heather nor Josh had seen the house before, causing them to elicit genuine reactions and making the finale even more chilling. Myrick and Sanchez made sure to make a movie that would transcend projectors and resorted to guerrilla marketing strategies. In an attempt to turn the make-believe story into a reality, they set up a website, www.blairwitch.com, where the posters of 3 missing filmmaker students were put up. It also depicted photos and videos of their personal belongings, clips from recorded interviews, police reports, and even parts of Heather's personal journal. More importantly, there was a timeline of unusual incidents from Blair's history, and the website also had a message board where people could discuss the case of disappeared students. They even managed to craft false stories like Mrs. Donahue's hopelessness with a police search, causing her to seek help from anyone who knew about her daughter. The crew also put up fake interviews of investigation and news reports on the website. Though amateurish in design, this webpage marketing gimmick left people in awe. I mean, think about it. It was the early 90s when the internet was still a luxury, and if your friend told you something, you couldn't just pull out a phone and fact check. And there, it was happening. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the internet having the most viral news of the season. The Blair Witch Project revolutionized marketing and sold something utterly fake as real, so much so that people actually began wondering what happened to Heather, Joshua, and Mike. Myrick and Sanchez even ditched the conventional trailer launch for the film's promotion. Rather, they showed teasers of the movie in colleges, which then spread through word of mouth and on various chat rooms and forums. They also released a few entirely fabricated documentaries long before the Blair Witch Project hit the screens. 2 years before its release, Myrick and Sanchez even aired some raw footage and an interview in John Pearson's split-screen first season's finale to promote the upcoming project. Fun fact, it was the same concept video they used while selling the story to the investors. In an interview for Rolling Stone, the creator said that they showed an 8-minute documentary of the lost students to the investors, along with some news clips and videos. The investors believed the incident to be true, and funds poured in. This video clip then went on to be called The Investors' Reel. The directors also released 3 documentaries to manipulate audience perception. The first one, known as The Curse of the Blair Witch, which gives a detailed backstory of the legend, was broadcast on the Sci-Fi Channel. The next one, titled Sticks and Stones, an exploration of the Blair Witch legend, was pretty similar to its predecessor. The following 2 documentaries, Massacre of the Burkittsville 7, The Blair Witch Legacy, and Shadow of the Blair Witch, were aired a year after the film hit the theaters. They planned the biggest, yet most successful gimmick at the Sundance Film Festival in January 1999. Myrick and Sanchez distributed pamphlets among the audience at the premiere, stating Michael, Heather, and Joshua had vanished into thin air and urged them to come forward with any available information. To strengthen the marketing trick, the actors had signed a contract to stay away from the public eye and did not even attend the premiere to keep up the facade. By August of that year, about 10,000 people were on the mailing list, allegedly finding clues about the missing young filmmakers. The actors were listed as missing or presumed dead, even on IMDb, and Heather recalls that people were shocked to see her alive at a high school reunion. The king of horror himself, Stephen King, was in awe of how real everything looked in the film. Following Sundance, the American film studio, Artisan Entertainment, bought the distribution rights to the film for $1.1 million. It even redesigned the website and played along with the directors in maintaining the illusion of reality. The original site, however, no longer exists, but if you're really keen on checking it out, you can visit the Haxon website to see the recreation. Also, the film's props, advertising, and promotional materials, pamphlets, news stories, and all other memorabilia are kept in the Horror Studies collection at the University of Pittsburgh Hillman Library. Though most of the public was not fooled by the marketing tactics and realized the truth after 2 days of release, most people believed in the myth. They even went to the filming locations to search for the witch, and during the months leading up to the release, everyone accepted whatever was said in the television mockumentary. The interviews of family members, historical experts, everything seemed too real to ignore. Many even led their own search parties, and the police departments received calls from people trying to provide information. Heather's mother even got condolence cards. It was not until the actors started appearing on television or other media that the public believed they were actually alive. Unfortunately, many had mixed responses to it, and were annoyed to realize their obsession was over a mere promotional trick. The directors undeniably did an amazing job with the promotional campaign, marketing Blair Witch Project as an experience rather than a simple movie, and making it one of the best examples of sleeper hits. Earning approximately $29 million during the opening weekend, the movie gained a huge ROI of approximately 40 times the budget. Starting with a meager budget of $60,000, its total box office collection made $250 million by the end of 1999, and became one of the first independent films to achieve such statistics. Coming to reception and accolades, the film won the Award of the Youth in the Foreign Film category at the Cannes Film Festival, where it did not even participate competitively. Though it didn't manage to get any Oscars nominations, Blair Witch Project is credited for being the most groundbreaking horror film since The Shining of 1980. It eventually gathered a niche fan base and was featured on covers of popular magazines like The Time and Newsweek. Following the success of the film in 1999, the Blair Witch Project released 2 sequels. The first one being a conventional horror tale, titled Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2, was launched in 2000, but unfortunately was not received well by the audience or the critics. The second one, released in 2016, tried to mirror the found footage framework of the original film, but could not do any better than the last one. Somehow, the original essence of the film could not be recreated in the sequels, and there are multiple reasons for this. While speaking to the New York Times, Myrick and Sanchez acknowledged that the record-breaking success of the first Blair Witch Project is nearly impossible to recreate because the movie was a product of a unique time, before the internet was ubiquitous and the media saw through fiction. Moreover, the film cashed in on building a sense of dread and impending doom. There are no cheesy jump scares, any masked men, or even a witch. Neither are there any on-screen deaths or heroic final struggles. All the viewers could see were dark, shaky shots by the inexperienced film students, which became its biggest USP. To think about it, it is impossible to replicate the Blair Witch marketing today. All it would take is a Google search to find out the truth. In 2017, the 20th Century Fox had to issue public apologies for spreading fake stories as a marketing strategy for its film, A Cure for Wellness. To be honest, the 90s classic just got lucky. In April 2022, Lionsgate, formerly known as the Artisan Studio, showed interest in relaunching the franchise and considered making it a streaming-exclusive movie. The project was supposed to be a joint venture between Lionsgate and Blumhouse Production. In May 2023, Oliver Park was signed as the director, with Myrick and Sanchez working as producers. However, the original cast was not approached for this part, and they even sent out an open letter demanding retroactive pay and for consultation on the new project. In April 2024, it was announced officially that the film was in development. Sanchez even shared his ideas of making a prequel set in the 1700s and a television series that would pick up right where the original movie ended. The movie had a lasting impact on various other media, including books, games, and even cartoons. D.A. Stern curated 2 case studies on the myth known as the Blair Witch Project, a dossier, and the Blair Witch, Book of Shadows, which were released in 1999 and 2000 respectively. These files continued the film's true story stunt and included various photos, interviews, and fake police reports furthering the legends of Ellie Kedward and Rustin Parr from the movie and documentaries. Stern also authored 2 novels in 2000, Blair Witch, Graveyard Shift, and Blair Witch, The Secret Confessions of Rustin Parr, featuring all the original characters and storyline. Before this, Claire Forbes made a visual novel based on the Blair Witch Project in May 1999. The publications continued from 2000 to 2001, with 8 adolescent books known as the Blair Witch Files. This series focused on a fictional cousin of Heather, Cade Merrill, who investigates the disappearance of the 3 students. Continuing its way into the world of comics, the movie got adapted into a one-shot comic by the same name, which was published by the Oni Press. Written by Jen Van Meter, it consisted of 3 short stories describing the fable of Blair Witch. The same team of writers and artists created a 4-issue series titled The Blair Witch Chronicles in the mid-2000s. Yet another standalone comic issue on the Blair Witch myth was released by Image Comics in October 2000, written by Ian Eddington, with the drawings done by Charlie Adlard. It was titled Blair Witch Dark Testaments. Yeah, the print publications list was exhaustive, but the movie's influence was much broader than just books and comics. In 2000, a video game trilogy was launched which expanded on the Blair Witch myth of the film. The games focused on different aspects of the legend, namely Rustin Parr, Coffin Rock, and Ellie Kedward respectively. Decades after this, another Blair Witch game was released in 2019. Developed by the Bloober team, this was a survival horror game initially playable on PC and Xbox One. Here's an Easter egg. Even Scooby-Doo drew from the movie's story. In their Halloween marathon of 1999, Cartoon Network showed the Scooby-Doo Project, a small portion that parodied the Blair Witch Project. Last year marked the film's 25th anniversary, and needless to say, it is still heralded as a masterpiece in horror filmmaking. Its legacy lived on with the release of several found-footage horror films, like The Paranormal Activity, The Last Exorcism, The Den, Creep, and the like, all of which became cult classics in itself. While the fad about found-footage horror flicks have somewhat declined, makers working independently for the internet streaming platforms continue to draw from Blair Witch Project's storytelling style. For instance, the web series Marble Hornets that aired from 2009 to 2014 used a similar premise of found-footage exploration centered around the urban legend of Slender Man. Blair Witch Project received both negative and appreciative reviews. Many critics praised it for establishing a new kind of psychological horror, and was ranked highly in several magazines like Entertainment Weekly, Cosmopolitan, and by the Chicago Film Critics Association. Even the director, Eli Roth, cited the movie as a promotional influence for his 2002 Cabin Fever. However, the film got entangled in several controversies. Some critics called out Blair Witch Project for being extremely similar to the plotlines of 1988's Cannibal Holocaust and The Last Broadcast of 1998. Cannibal Holocaust director Ruggero Deodato even publicly slammed the film over its claim of being an original production. The blame game followed with The Last Broadcast creators Stefan Avalos and Lance Wheeler, alleging that the film was a total ripoff of their work and threatened to sue Haxan Films for copyright violations. Nonetheless, the film managed to create a niche fanbase who went into a frenzy following the film's release. Many even crowded the Griggs house and vandalized the property in an attempt to collect mementos by breaking pieces of the house. Crazy, huh? Sadly, the town community decided to abolish the house. Marvelous verdict. Well, the conclusion is simple. The Blair Witch Project was much more than a movie. It was a dream. An ambition that changed the found-footage genre and paved its way into the world of horror super hits. What began as a bold experimental move without any professional team, or even a special effects soundtrack, somehow maneuvered its way to become the most viral sensation of the time. It is, however, undeniable that it was the scarcity of hovering netizens and a curiosity about the unknown that took the movie to a whole new level. Would things have been the same if everyone had a smartphone in their pocket? I don't think so. Mystery and uncertainty had a different allure altogether, which is sadly lost in today's information age. The Blair Witch Project was fortunate enough to find the right time frame to exploit the internet to its benefit, rather than being subjected to the web's overarching power. Seems like a good enough justification to what happened to Blair Witch Project and why none of the sequels could make a mark. Do you think the Blair Witch Project was an accidental blockbuster? Or do you think the movie was indeed a genius masterpiece of Myrick and Sanchez? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you later. Until the next one.